Let me set the stage. I'm Elise, 33, translator for a big shot company that keeps me on my toes with languages I barely knew existed until they handed me the dictionary. My life's not your typical fairy tale, it's more a series of plot twists. I married straight out of college, thinking I'd nailed life. But fast forward a few years, the marriage tanked, big surprise, right? But it gave me the best thing ever, my daughter Lily, a spitfire at 8, who has more wit in her pinky than most do in their entire head. Then, there's David, my current flame, or as I like to call him, Mr. Right the second time around. We bumped into each other at a dusty old book club. He was arguing about Hemingway's love of brevity, and I was all in for Fitzgerald's flair. Sparks flew over worn pages and tepid coffee. That was the start of endless debates and coffee dates. A year down the road, David popped the question at the same dingy coffee shop, with a ring as understated as our meeting. "Elise, will you?" He had started, all nervous, which wasn't his usual confident self. "Make your coffee every morning? Only if you promise to pick up your socks," I quipped, before slipping in a serious, "Yes, I will." But, as luck would have it, not everyone was popping champagne and tossing confetti. Enter Mrs. Thompson, David's mother, a tough nut with a stare that could curdle milk. The first time I met her, she looked me up and down like I was a sofa she regretted buying. "So, you're the one David can't stop yapping about," she had said, her voice sharp as a knife. "Guilty as charged. And you must be the famous Mrs. Thompson. David says you make the best cherry pie in town." From that day on, every visit was a chess game. She'd check my moves, always ready to declare a checkmate. But David was a gem. He'd squeeze my hand under the table, his way of saying, "Ignore her, I'm right here." One day, lounging on our rickety deck while David flipped burgers on the grill, he brought it up. "Mom's a bit old school, Elise. She's all about family legacy and that jazz. Yeah, and she's got it in her head that I'm done having kids. Thinks Lily's it and worries about the precious family line," I'd replied, the frustration bubbling up. David had put down the tongs, his face serious for once. I know. She's worried you won't want more kids. But whatever we decide, it's our business, not hers." Despite the gloom cast by David's mom, our wedding day was everything I'd hoped it would be, modest, but filled with joy. My daughter Lily was dolled up in a cute pink dress, practically floating around the venue, her laughter a melody that softened even the sternest hearts. Everyone we loved was there, smiling and cheering, except for one. Mrs. Thompson sat through the entire event with a face like she'd sucked on a lemon. She didn't even get up to congratulate us. Living with David, it felt like we'd hit the jackpot: warm, cozy evenings, and the constant buzz of a happy, albeit small, family. But as much as our home was filled with love, there was always an undercurrent of tension, thanks to one persistent storm cloud, Mrs. Thompson. One Saturday morning, while David was out running errands, Mrs. Thompson decided it was a good time to drop by unannounced. The doorbell rang just as Lily and I were in the middle of a heated Uno match. "Grams!" Lily shouted, dropping her cards and racing to the door. I followed more slowly, steeling myself. "Mrs. Thompson, what a surprise," I said, my voice polite but cool. She brushed past me without a greeting, her eyes sweeping the room like she was the health inspector and we were a restaurant on the brink of being shut down. "I was just in the neighborhood," she said, though we both knew she lived on the other side of town. "Thought I'd see what you all were up to without David around to supervise." As I headed to the kitchen, I heard her start in on Lily. "So, young lady, has your mother been keeping you busy, or are you just lazing around the house all day?" "We were playing Uno, and I was winning," Lily responded with a confidence I wished I could muster. "That's no real skill, is it? Why don't you read something more stimulating?" I returned with her tea, placing it on the coaster with a little more force than necessary. "Lily's top of her class, Mrs. Thompson. Uno's just for fun." Mrs. Thompson sipped her tea, making a face. "Well, as long as she's not falling behind. David tells me you're managing well enough, but I have to see it for myself." And making sure he's not burdened with more than he can handle is part of that. I sat down across from her, forcing a calm I didn't feel. David isn't burdened. He's thrilled. We all are. This is our family now. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Well, I'll let David know my thoughts. He deserves to hear it from his mother. As she walked to the door, I followed, my voice firmer now. David hears everything from me, Mrs. Thompson. We don't keep secrets or run reports to parents. We're adults, building a life together. She paused at the door, her back to me. Just remember, Elise. I'm his mother. My approval might not mean much to you, but it means a lot to him. Trying to get along with Mrs. Thompson was like trying to smooth a crumpled paper. No matter how hard you try, the lines are always there. But for David's sake, I kept at it. One evening, I decided to host a dinner. Nothing fancy, just a casual thing to maybe melt some of that ice. I'm making your mom's favorite tonight, cherry pie. Think it'll win her over? I asked David as he helped me set the table. David chuckled, straightening a fork. Mom's tough, but nobody can resist your cherry pie. Just take it easy, yeah? She can be, a lot. The plan was simple. Dinner at 6, pie for dessert, and hopefully some kind of truce by the end of the night. But as luck would have it, just as I pulled the pie out of the oven, looking golden and perfect, Lily's school called. Mom, it's Ms. Carson. She says I left my project at school, and it's due tomorrow. Lily's face was a mix of panic and hope. Okay, we'll go get it. Can't have all your hard work go to waste, I said, glancing at the clock. Mrs. Thompson would be here any minute. I scribbled a quick note for her, just in case we missed each other. Back in 8. Make yourself at home. We rushed to the school and back, making it in just under 20 minutes. When we walked in, Mrs. Thompson was seated at the table, looking like she owned the place. David was pouring her a glass of wine. Dinner went by with the usual small talk. How's work, how's school, the weather, safe topics that kept the night from turning into a minefield. Then came the pie. I served everyone a generous slice, smiling a bit too eagerly. Hope it's as good as you remember, Mrs. Thompson. We all took a bite, and immediately, Lily's face scrunched up. Ugh, Mom, this tastes weird. Confused, I took a bite myself. My mouth was assaulted by a blast of salt and sour, a far cry from what I'd prepared. I looked up at Mrs. Thompson, who was watching me with a smug look. This doesn't taste right, Elise. Did you follow the recipe properly? She asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Of course, I made it just like I started, but then it hit me. She had been alone in the house. My eyes narrowed. David, noticing the tension, jumped in. Maybe it's just a bad batch of cherries? Let's not sweat it. How about we order some pizza instead? Sounds great, I managed to say, my eyes still fixed on Mrs. Thompson. After David went to order the pizza, Mrs. Thompson leaned in close and whispered, maybe next time you'll think twice before leaving me alone in your kitchen. I was stunned. She had actually sabotaged the pie. I kept my cool, though. Is this how you want to play it? Just making sure you know where you stand, she hissed back. The rest of the evening was a blur. Pizza came, we ate, and Mrs. Thompson left soon after, not a word about the pie. David seemed oblivious, happy even that we'd managed to salvage the night with takeout. Life after the pie incident felt like walking on eggshells, especially whenever Mrs. Thompson was around. But David, bless his heart, thought a change of scenery might do us some good. So, out of the blue, he comes home one evening, all smiles, waving a set of plane tickets like he's won the lottery. Guess what, Elise? We're going on vacation. And not just any vacation, India, he announced, practically bouncing on his heels. India? Seriously? I couldn't hide my surprise. India had been on my bucket list for as long as I could remember. But what about, your mom? David's face fell a bit, then he shrugged. Well, she's coming too. Thought it'd be good for all of us to spend some quality time together, bond a bit. I sighed, already dreading the drama, but not